Welcome, everybody, to the COVID Economy Leadership Forum. This is the second session of many. Four. That is many, it seems, in this particular type of environment. And we've got a panel of experts for you. But first, let's think about what the stage looks like today that we're operating in. Think about the past few months. We've had regional lockdowns. I don't have to tell you that. You're probably at your home. This may look like I'm in my office, but you'll notice there's nobody there. I'm at home. We've had large-scale unemployment. It's zoomed high. Hopefully, it's coming down a little bit now. We've had nationwide protests. Schools and businesses have been closing, and subsequently, some of them are opening. Perhaps more of them will be opening soon. We've had people hoarding essential items, from food to toilet paper and other items. And we've had a deep drop in travel. We've even had government stimulus checks. I don't know about you, but I don't remember ever receiving one of those before, at least not on the basis that we're talking about. And that's what's been happening over the last couple of months. It's actually defined the beginning of 2020 for not only the United States, but for the entire world. In the upcoming months, we're going to be seeing regions opening up. We've already started to see that, some more successfully than others. We're going to see some continued social distancing, perhaps, maybe not in your neighborhood, but in other neighborhoods. And we're going to be seeing continuously, perhaps, people wearing face coverings. We are going to get a return to normalcy. Well, we're going to get a return to a new normalcy, or maybe even, let's call it a changing normal instead, because we still don't really know what it will entail. So let me give you some stats and some facts that I've learned from a number of sources, including the Cleveland Federal Reserve Bank, Campos and Schmidt Market Research, both of whom are market research companies, NPR and Bloomberg, just to name a few. Consumer spending, which is, well, it comprises about 2/3 of the gross domestic product, dipped quickly and deeply, frankly. And it's starting to pull back. But guess what? The rich are still not spending. It's the poor that are starting to spend again. The rich are hanging on to their money. There are a number of emotions that many of us are going through. And according to these research firms, the two top emotions that we're hearing about now that people are displaying and saying they're displaying are worry and restfulness. And according to the research, 30% of the people know somebody who has contracted coronavirus. So maybe it's not you. Just the other day, I had somebody ask me, "Have you know? I haven't come in contact with anybody who's got coronavirus, who's had it. Do you know anybody?" And I thought about it for a few minutes, and I said, "Yeah, I know 2 people, and then there may have been a couple who might have." Anyway, that's what we have facing us today. That's what we've been through. That's what we're going through. And today, I've asked a number of experts to come in, share experiences with you, share their expertise with you, and basically help us understand what we should be doing over the upcoming weeks and months in order to get back on track. Now, you probably see over on this side the vendors who are part of this. Now, I'm part of these companies, and my team at Confirmed and I started talking about what we can do. So we make a scheduling software. And we looked at what people were doing, and we said, how do we make it better for the new normal? And we did that. And then we said, how do we make it better for the people who are in at-risk groups, such as schools or people who are unemployed? And we did that. And we said, well, now what more can we do? And we decided to go back to our roots in media, which several of us have, and see if we can put together these sessions. So we've got 4 of them in this series. Last time we did one for educators, for principals, superintendents, et cetera, about how they can do better with their schools and meeting this environment. Today, we're talking about a more general topic of just how you as either a business person or as a person just out on the streets in general, or I guess right now locked up potentially, in general, can handle what we need to handle and can optimize. And then we've got 2 coming up for increasing business if you're in the business of business, and one about how to do better with Zoom, since most of us are going to have to learn how to use Zoom, WebEx, GoToMeeting, Google Meet, or some other types of products that will empower us to do what we're doing today. Our panel today includes LaToya Johnson-Rainey. She's an entrepreneur, facilitator, author, and mentor. She is serving 2 roles for us today. One is as a business person. She's the owner of a hair boutique, Shadyside in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And she's also a mentor, a business specialist for the Entrepreneurs Forever, and a mentor at the Mannesmann Institute, which helps Main Street businesses do better at their business on a continuing basis. And I actually met her through one of her mentees. We have Jay Peltier, who comes to us from Fargo, North Dakota. Jay's a partner, trainer, and here's my favorite, a transformational consultant. I love that title, at Dale Carnegie of North Dakota and Minnesota. In the past, he's been a teacher, he's been in real estate, he's been in recruitment and human resources, and a great guy to be able to handle some of the change leadership type of topics that we need to be talking today, and the change management, because that's what this is all about these days, change. We have Dr. Mitchell Nichols, PhD, a professor, author, and consultant. He joined us yesterday, was it? Boy, it seems like such a long time ago, Doc. His specialty is diversity and inclusion training for a number of types of organizations, including law enforcement, which these days is very important, I suspect, school districts. He works with parents and students, and with other types of organizations. He's an adjunct faculty member at Point Park University in Pittsburgh, and he's on the advisory board at Point Park and also at Penn State University. And we have Christopher Elliott, who's joining us from Reno, Nevada area. And I found Christopher by reading his articles, and I kept looking at his articles over and over again about travel and travel advocacy and things like that. And every time I came to one of his articles, I thought about how good it was, and it differentiated him from all those other travel authors. But he's an author, he's a consumer advocate, he's a journalist. You may have read him in USA Today, Washington Post, New York Times, Money Magazine, National Geographic. I haven't seen you in all those places, Christopher, but I have in a couple of them. And he's also an advocate for travelers, and I'd love to be able to talk to him about that and help us out there a little bit today. So that's who we have today to help you out, and hopefully we'll have a great conversation. Feel free to drop some questions into the chat for us if you'd like, and we'll see if we can handle them as we go. Let's start with Toya, if you would, please. As I said, you are satisfying the role of business owner, and also, which actually several of you are, business owner and also of a mentor. So can you give us a feel? Let's talk as a business owner. What have you experienced? Tell us a little bit about your business, what you've experienced over the last couple of months, and some lessons learned, perhaps.
Okay. So yes, I'm a business owner, and I facilitate peer-to-peer business mentoring through Entrepreneurs Forever. So, and there are about 12 different businesses within our pods. And so as a business owner, I've experienced many highs and lows through the past couple of months. You know, obviously everything had to change. Plans that we had in place early February, going into the end of February, at a halt. We were in the process of opening another location in a different state in West Virginia, and all of that had to stop. However, throughout the past 3 months, pivoting has been very, very instrumental, you know. And then there are definitely silver linings within that. Learning how to do more video consultations, things like that. Within our business, a hair boutique, Shadyside, we're a private wig salon. And so we cater to a lot of women who are experiencing hair loss. A lot of it is from things such as chemo or stress, trichotillomania, which is an anxiety disorder that may cause you to pull your hair out. So naturally, a lot of our clients really needed us at this moment, but we're not considered essential, so we're closed. Our brick and mortar was closed. So really shifting and doing more things online and creating that private experience online that before we did not think we can do. And so there are a lot of highlights in this, you know, just being pushed out of your comfort zone, really having to hone in on where your strengths are and changing where your weaknesses were, you know.
So LaToya, you said, I mean, this is a very personal type of thing that you deal with when women lose their hair and need to be able to find a way in order to be able to feel more comfortable as they talk to people. You said that you didn't think you were going to be able to move online, but somehow you managed to do that. Can you
Yes.
give us a little sense of, as a business owner, what clicked and how did that transformation happen?
Sure. Prior to this, it was hard to figure out how to really give that one-on-one comfort during, something so traumatic. And also without exposing your clients to advertise that. So how do you advertise privacy? Really, I struggled with that we've been open for 8 years. I struggled with that for 7 years, just could not figure out that link. Through this, everyone is just exposed. There really isn't any privacy. People are at home, they're trying to teach their kids. They're working from home. People are busting in the room that you're supposed to be working in, and they know you're working, but they want a snack, So I think it's something when everyone is going through something together, just like the loss of income at first. If you have a flood or a fire and it's an isolated incident, it's isolated. But when everyone is going through it together, you have a little bit more understanding from your clients, from your suppliers, your shareholders, all of those people, while you're getting it together.
So LaToya, I'm hoping that a take home is not that you would not have been able to do it if not for the pandemic. Is it something that was just exposed because of the pandemic, or is it something that was actually caused by the pandemic?
I would say it's a little bit of both. I think with everyone being in the same boat, it gives you a little bit more confidence to not be so perfect in your delivery. Prior to that, you would think you have to have everything figured out for something that has never happened before. Mm-hmm. But when you're moving together, people are more understanding. And if you do make a mistake, you can learn from it. And, this is the time to make those mistakes because we're making them together. So if we're doing a video and it's not quite right, or you didn't get the link, or the mute button doesn't work, no one is expecting you to have everything together. And I think a lot of times as an entrepreneur, you're expected just to be so great. You're going to be compared to big box companies all the time, and they have all these people working, and you may be customer service, the manager, the supplier, you may have all these different roles that you're playing. And, it just made it a lot more comfortable to do so.
Well, I'm glad to hear that part, that's helped you open it up, and perhaps we can use this as a lesson learned that maybe we can take more chances than we thought we could before. It's interesting because I've had this very same conversation with Shannon a number of times about the fact that I've always thought that the media that we do should be perfect, and I'm always nervous about that. This whole pull out of a cell phone, and it's very different from what I grew up with doing radio and TV in the 80s and 90s and 2000s. And it's just a very difficult thing for me to transition to. If I could transition for a moment to Jay. Jay, you've got a very interesting situation that maybe similar, maybe parallel to LaToya's, in that you're also a business owner, a different type of geography, and a different type of business. You've got an umbrella of a huge organization behind you. Are the challenges different for you than they were for LaToya?
No, I really don't think they're any different. When we look at our clients throughout the state of North Dakota, one, we're kind of geographically distanced, so we're socially distanced regardless through the pandemic, but it doesn't change the fact that businesses shut down. So being able to come alive and shift online and maneuver and adjust and pivot, I think we're all kind of in the same boat. It certainly helps being part of being under the umbrella, because it's an easy phone call for myself to make a phone call to any of the other Dale Carnegie owners and get some ideas on how they're maneuvering and how they're shifting, adjusting, changing, and what's working for them. So certainly there's an advantage of being part of a franchise network right now in merely solving problems, but we're coming across the exact same problems of many other businesses. So anyone we can reach out to is a great thing to do.
So you, as a transformational agent, you actually teach people how to how to do change management. Has that helped you at all in doing that?
Yes, it has. Just being a part of it, living it, researching it has certainly helped ourselves. But at the same time, with everything going on, it is very simple to get caught up in the day to day. And it's very simple to just put your head down and go to work instead of looking around and recognizing some of the things that we coach in change management, which has a lot to do with stress and trust. And if we can ourselves make sure we're living those principles and able to manage through trust, be able to reduce stress and worry, those are big time things that we can be practicing every day. So certainly it does help that we coach it, but we also have to remind ourselves of it every day.
Well, that's a very good point. Doc Nickols, so you deal with other types of organizations yourself. You and I talked before. You do work with education institutions. You're part of an education institution. You do diversity training with law enforcement agencies. And I can't imagine, based upon what's happened over the last couple of weeks, that there's an organization or type of organization that hasn't been embroiled in scenarios that need that type of thing more than law enforcement does for various reasons. Can you give us some sense about what you're seeing elsewhere that might either hammer in what LaToya and Jay were just saying, or some things that might add to that?
Well, if you just stay specific to the area of diversity training, implicit unconscious bias, law enforcement seemed to be at the forefront at this particular time, but every organization needs it. I was in a conversation with somebody this week for one of our regional newspapers. And as I was talking to that reporter, I was indicating that there are certain things needed at the corporate level, but some of the things I do are not just limited to that. So people sometimes just want to put me off into that area, which is a critical area right now. But I can identify with some of the stuff that Jay is talking about in terms of transformation, because for probably about 15 years at the graduate school level at a place called Geneva College, I taught organizational change. The first time I remember hearing the word change agent was when I was a doctoral student at the University of Pittsburgh many, many years ago. So when we look at what's happening today, small organizations as well as large ones, diversity, inclusion, equity, those are critical terms in trying to make sure that everybody understands the playing field. And we invite everybody to the table because everybody brings value to what happens to the culture in the workplace. But some other things I do outside of law enforcement, outside of school districts, is working with people in the business sector, the for-profit sector, in terms of trying to make sure that in some cases doing personal coaching, other times professional coaching, so that we bring a balance. All of us have heard about work-life balance. Well, work has changed and life has changed. So we're looking for a new normal. Some people may have heard of a guy by the name of Thomas Kuhn's. Thomas Kuhn's, some decades ago, came out with something called the structure of scientific revolution. It's not different than another guy who's a futurist named, basically talking about this whole idea of Joe Barker talking about paradigms. Everybody, it doesn't matter who you are at this particular time in America and in other parts of the world, with the resurgence of issues with COVID-19 in China right now, with the explosion of COVID-19 in South America, Brazil, other places around the US, we're all in this new space that would be a new normal. And so how we navigate that becomes very important as to whether we will be able to survive. A lot of people, small businesses and some department stores that have been around for decades are now going out of business because no one thought that this kind of thing would happen. But yet there is a way to be able to navigate this and reinvent ourselves by thinking of something else. I can think very quickly, and I won't take a lot of time saying this, of a guy who I believe was a Columbia University grad, got into trouble with his hedge fund and wound up being, at least they wanted to put him away for the rest of his life in prison. He said, I didn't do anything wrong, but he lost a lot of money in that hedge fund. I spoke with him after he was released after about 10 years in prison. Really neat guy, but made some bad decisions in terms of other folks' money. And he was asked by another professional, well, what are you going to do now that you don't have your Series 6 license. What are you going to do? He says, I'm going to reinvent myself. And I think whether people have gotten into the kinds of problems that that gentleman has gotten into, it's a good time now. There's a lot of time that people have on their hands to begin to think about, how would I do different things in business, how I can explore some different areas. So part of my role, and I would tend to think part of Jay's role, is to help people begin to work through those kinds of things and find out that you really can become more creative, even in this space, than you thought you could.
No, that makes perfect sense. Thank you. And what's interesting is the types of things you just made me think about is that one of the statistics that Compost had talked about was that, and I don't have the exact number with me, I just jotted down some notes. Most people are putting confidence in the local cases decreasing as when they're trying to figure out when they're going to return to normal. So part of the decisions that we're making as individuals have to do what's happening all around us. And I appreciate that. And what you're talking about. If I can sort of take that, and it's actually an interesting way to think about it. Now, what about on an international basis? If I turn to Christopher for a minute or two, he's the world traveler of the bunch. And Christopher, can you give us some sense about, are you seeing something different here from, we hear the statistics about what's going up and what's going down, but are you seeing something different in your travels or in the people that you talk to internationally related to the way that they're dealing with the pandemic?
Yeah, well, I don't know if you know my whole backstory, but I was stuck in Nice in southern France during the initial part of the outbreak. So I had a front row seat to the international aspect of all this. And I have to tell you, it's very interesting. I cover travel, but I don't just write about travel. All of the stories that I do effectively are funnels into my nonprofit organization. I run a 501c3 called Elliott Advocacy, and we help consumers every day fix their problems. That we have a strong emphasis on self-advocacy, but if that doesn't work, I have a team of volunteers that help, and one of our specialty areas is travel. So we saw this whole thing collapse in late February, early March, April, and I was stuck overseas. So I had to deal with a lot of the whole transformational aspects of a business that your other panelists, and especially Mitchell, was just discussing now, where we just didn't know what the next move was going to be. So there was a lot of people running around, the sky is falling, oh no. And a lot of my clients were also, had basically stopped paying their bills. So I was going, okay, how am I going to make this? How am I going to pay my bills where I am? It was really a crazy time. It still is crazy. But I think the thing with travel is it's an excellent barometer of business in general, because, if people are traveling, it means that people are doing business. And I have found to answer your question in a very roundabout way, I found a little bit of a disconnect between what all of the polls and studies are saying about our travel habits and our travel intentions and what is actually happening.
What's that disconnect?
So the disconnect is that you have people who are saying that they want to travel, but they're not actually booking trips. And they're staying home, they're waiting for that coronavirus vaccine. And you have a lot of business travelers who are sitting on the sidelines now, and they're doing exactly what we're doing right now. They're doing the Zoom and Skype calls, and they are doing grocery delivery for whatever service you prefer. And they are just sitting this out and waiting. I don't know what they're waiting for. That's the thing, is what are we waiting for here? I think just to circle back to some of the other comments that were made, I love the fact that we're in kind of a transformational stage. But I think that the other thing that a lot of folks have underestimated, and I'm not an analyst, and I'm not educated in this area, but I am an observer. As a journalist, I observe what people are saying and what people are doing, is I think we have probably vastly underestimated the extent of the transformation that still lies ahead. We're talking about, the new normal, things are going to go back to the way they kind of were. I think that especially if we're dealing with a second wave, or not even getting over this first wave, the extent of the transformation still has been vastly underestimated by everyone. So that would be my takeaway.
You cover a bellwether industry in travel in doing that, and you just intimated that a few minutes ago as well. So as travel right now is in the dumper, in any sense of the imagination, their costs have gone up because of the situation that they've got to, as they have to deal with it, and their revenues have just gone through the floor. Are they going to be able to come back, and is it going to look the same as it does today from an industry standpoint? Forget we know there's going to be a new normal. Is there only going to be one airline by the time it's all done?
Oh yeah, like Aeroflot for the United States. Great, wouldn't that be great? No, and in fact, if the one airline is going to survive, it'll probably be Southwest. But I digress. No one knows. That's the thing, is that no one really knows. There's such a disconnect. American Airlines is a great example, where you have the CEO saying one thing and you have the analyst saying another thing. Who's right? Well, I guess we won't know until we know. But we have a couple of important dates coming up. October, when all the federal money starts to run out and the airlines can start firing people. That'll be we'll know then. But long term, I think that people have really, going back to this whole thought of there being this major transformational change, people have, it's as if they all woke up one morning and say, wait a minute, we don't have to do all these business trips. Right. We can stay right here.
Yeah, well, Shannon and I will tell you that she and I, on a very consistent basis, have been doing Zoom meetings, GoToMeetings, WebEx. I know Jay does a lot of WebEx as part of our normal set of business to begin with. And now we look at it as other people are just catching up with us. Should it have been something that we've known about before and that the travel industry just hasn't noticed it because people have been slow to make that move? Or is this something that they're going to go back on some level to start traveling more often again? For business?
Well, I think we knew 30 years ago that the internet had this promise of doing video conferencing and virtual meetings and virtual work. That was all there already. I've been doing it myself in my practice. My entire organization, Elliott Advocacy, is a virtual organization. We don't have an office or anything like that. We have people all over the world who are helping out. But I do think, though, that the travel industry had its head in the sand about this, and especially when it comes to business travel. If you go to the Business Travel Association meetings, you find people who are just in denial about this, going, oh no, people still have to travel. They're still going to need to do calls and go to businesses and go to meetings, and they're right there. Of course, there are some people where you cannot replace a real meeting, but I think you can replace a lot of them, and that's exactly what's happening now.
So let's take that a step further, and we'll start with Christopher, and if anybody else wants to chime in too, please do. According to the statistics that Campos just recently released, 43 of the people who are in their poll, there are a couple thousand, I would say 20,000 plus people in their poll, or in their survey. 43% of them say that they're less productive working from home than working from the office. So can we extrapolate that same type of statistic out to say maybe that business meetings on the road might have that same type of scenario where they just go, I don't really want to do this remotely? I mean, as having been doing business development for many years, I know that it's always better to be in front of somebody next to them so you can do the informal stuff than it is to pick up the phone or send an email in many cases. What's your thought on that?
I don't know very much about productivity. I would have to defer to the other panelists on that.
Okay.
But I can say, though, that people are trying to get used to they're trying to get used to what's the new reality that we're in right now. And so I think that we've all been socialized to work in an office. That was when I was in J school. It was always, you're going to go work in an office and you're going to go out and meet your sources in person. Now we are in this transformational stage. And I think that the next generation is going to be absolutely fine. My kids who are in high school and college now are going to be probably much more comfortable with a Zoom meeting than they would be. And so I think it's really, we're moving in that direction right now.
Yeah. Anybody else want to comment on that? Doc Mitchell, you're on mute. I know you're trying to talk. There you go.
Yeah, I could speak just briefly to that. One of my kids, I won't name the company because I think everybody would know the name of this particular company. It's an international company and it's in the healthcare area. She is a senior HR director supporting the president of that company. And her days were already long when she was on the ground at their headquarters in Pittsburgh. But she talks now about her days being 12 and 13 hours long from home. I have another friend who is at a position at Penn Law, University of Pennsylvania Law School. And as she and I were talking on Saturday, they've got them so busy doing so many things. I've talked to other folks in nonprofits, and the nonprofits have their people working from home, and it seems like they're busier. So the companies, some companies are trying to make people more productive to do a number of things. If you're in certain positions, you're finding things for your folks to do, and they're focused. We know years ago, people were able to track some of their employees when the old BlackBerry phone existed because it tracked them corporately. Now, people have iPhones, they have other types of things, and the companies are tracking the level of productivity. And if you're supposed to be in a Zoom meeting or Microsoft Teams or Google Meet or something like that, they will know whether you are or are not and have expectations for you.
Now, and I'm gathering what you're telling us, in addition to the issue about tracking and working with the company, you're also talking about a lack of work-life balance that we at least had in the office.
There are no boundaries for some folks because from the time they wake up in the morning, they're expected. Again, I can use my daughter as an example, one of my daughters. The idea is that she works for a global company. So she's got some folks that perhaps respond to her who are in a different part of the world, different time zones. She used to work for another company a few years ago called Bayer, and going back and forth to Germany. She had over 50 direct reports across the country, not including the thousands of people that work under those direct reports. So we can take advantage of it, but the boundaries are not always there. And I see Jay looks like he wants to chime in on that too.
Yeah, certainly. One of the things that we are seeing is boundaries have kind of gone out the window. Whether it would be a Zoom meeting of kids running in and dogs barking, that's kind of our new reality. And part of that responsibility lies on leadership within the organizations. So what are we doing to protect our employees from not getting burnt out? And it could be simple changes of, our specific Dale Carnegie organization in North Dakota. We went to a 4-day work week. One, because when this does come back, we want our employees to be just as productive as they were before they went in. And what that means is, you're working from home, I can do the laundry, lunch break, I can mow the lawn, can do a lot of different things. So if we can make sure that we're working diligently on what we need to work on for 4 days, we're not stretching a 4-day work week into a 5-day work week, which in a lot of cases is productivity. That's what's happening. That's why we see this productivity drop. So I honestly think a lot of that comes back on leadership and teams and saying, okay, if productivity is dropping, what are small shifts and adjustments that we can make that will help increase productivity at home?
So if I can mention a couple of things that are from my past, one of them that was foisted upon me very happily by the last organization for which I worked for somebody other than myself, and the other one which I've been telling people for many years. The first one is I went to work for a company that was a high-tech company in which I came in to run one of their departments. And in doing that, I walked in the door and they had open offices like you see behind me here and those types of things. And they had a 4-day work week, just like what you're talking about there, Jay. Wonderful. But the way they implemented it was 4 days in the office and 1 day at home. So that way you don't have to worry about the doctor's offices and the kids to the doctor and all those other stuff. Just schedule them at whatever Friday you want to, and you can take a piece of any one of those days and do that. You're expected to work from home that day, but there is some semblance of order in order to make it happen. And then there's one that I've been telling people for years. I learned this very, very early in my career because I was working for companies in other cities and sometimes had 1 or 2 person offices in a remote location, or sometimes was working out of my home or out of some shared space office. I found that when I was working at home, one of the coolest and best habits I formed, and unfortunately I don't always do it these days, but I do it once in a while, is to walk out the back door in the morning, go around to the front of the house and walk in the front door as if you've just commuted to work. And then in the evening, do the commute back home again. It gives you a sense of closure and I am no longer at work. But if you're going to do that, you got to remember not to do work once you get home for the evening. And that part is also challenging.
Yeah, I agree about the boundaries, especially as a business owner, because you do find yourself overworking, right? Typical work week, 40 hours, you may do 80, you know? But as far as having a retail and service business, I see it as a great alternative, but not as a takeover for it. Things that I've noticed between a lot of me and my peers is migraines, you know, looking at a screen excessively, tension in your neck, anxiety, all of those things, and not having those boundaries set, you know, not having the social connection with people. As far as with retail and service, doing it online is a lot more salesmanship. Whereas if they're coming in the store, they touch, feel, the product gets to sell itself. So although I love the fact that I can sell internationally, 12 o'clock at night, you can make money when you're asleep, all of those things. But when it's time to communicate with the client, it seems as though you have to provide more visual and sell even harder. And a normal appointment, which would usually take 30 minutes, is now taking an hour. So,
LaToya, you just made me have visions of 20 years ago when Zappos, or 25 years ago, whenever it was, when Zappos came to its great big growth. And Zappos is an online shoe seller. And I heard so many people say, how can you buy shoes when you can't try them on? And they turned into one of the largest resellers in the world. They sold lots and lots of shoes, and they eventually were bought out by Amazon. I guess they're not that far from you, Christopher. They're in the other part of Nevada, Zappos. And it's just, I'm hearing you say the same types of things that we were saying back then, only right now it's hitting us all as opposed to just some of us.
Yeah, so great alternatives, you know, but there's just those hiccups that you do have, you know. Yeah. So I don't think it's a replacement. Again, I think it's an alternative, and just being mindful of that time that you're putting in. You know?
Okay. Christopher, if I can ask you at this point, we talked a little bit about the airline industry, but for most of us as business people and for most of us as individuals, at some time in the next couple of years, we will either travel or want to travel and be scared of traveling. In doing that, you have your pulse on what's happening in the industry. Can you explain to us what we would expect to see that might be different and shocking today than it would have been in December when we took our last trip, or whenever it was for many of us?
Well, I had a story that just went up in the Washington Post a few hours ago about social distancing on planes, and then the week before on how your screening experience has changed. So I have covered this quite a bit, and I wish I could give you a definitive answer about what to expect. But the truth is, everything is still being decided and negotiated. I'll give you an example. Frontier Airlines decided to start temperature screening passengers, and it was one of the first ones in the United States to do that. One of the big unanswered questions is, though, what if you have an elevated temperature? Well, in the old days, they would say, tough luck, you're going to lose the value of your ticket. Frontier, to its credit, said we will either offer a voucher for a future ticket or a refund. The TSA is right now being corralled into doing things that it doesn't want to do. There's a lot of pressure on it to also do temperature screenings. They're looking inside, just as an example, they're looking inside your face mask, and that's especially true if you've got one of those World War II style gas masks. They'll want to look inside that for sure. But other screening changes are going to include the food. They're now looking at your food more closely, and you can't hand your boarding pass to the TSA agent. You have to show it to him or her. But the thing is, you talk to the TSA and they say, well, we're not really sure. Things are going to change in the future. We just don't know what those are going to be. And so it's conceivable that even a week or two from now, things are going to be different. And this goes back to my point about the whole new normal and flexibility, is that you can't know. You could go online before your flight and you could look up all of the websites that cover air travel and say, okay, I have a really good idea of what's going to happen. And you could be wrong. So big takeaway for you would be, make sure that you expect the unexpected when you're flying or staying at a hotel or renting a car. I mean, one really good example is I was at a hotel and I expected one of those little stickies on the door, because I had seen it on, I think it was CBS Sunday Morning. I had seen, oh, look, they're putting these little stickies. Those are like little seals on the door to say your room has been sanitized and it's all good to go.
Well, like they put on the toilets they've been doing for years, right?
Yeah,
or
exactly.
The corners on the toilet paper. Yeah, okay.
Exactly. And I thought, and so, right, the toilet paper is another good example.
Visual indicators.
Right. These are things that are done to make us feel more comfortable about traveling. And I didn't see any of those things in my hotel. I saw a lot of these little billboards that said, we're clean, we've done look at all these things we've done. No way of even verifying that. Yeah. Anyway, point I'm trying to make is you just don't know. Be flexible, expect anything.
So my wife's been saying for years that I'm one of the ultimate germaphobes. I don't know if I'm quite like Howie Mandel, but I have been for a while. And we sort of, and now what she's telling people is that everyone else is catching up to me, which I think is kind of a fun idea. But at the same time, I hear you a few seconds ago. I mean, I don't hand my phone to anybody, but I keep my boarding pass on my phone. And it's always nerve-wracking to me when I go to Planet Fitness, for instance, and they've got the check-in and the people want to grab my phone and do it. And I say, no, I refuse to. I've been doing that for years. And now I think people have got to be catching up with that sort of idea, and that's becoming the new normal, I think. But you just mentioned the face masks where they may be taking your face mask off. Isn't that a little bit more dangerous with having them touching your face mask? What is the sense of that?
Yeah, I got a lot of questions actually about that. So they have to look inside your mask because you might have something in there that's contraband. They don't do it very often. But also, when you're at when you go through to TSA, they will check your boarding pass and verify your identity. That's the first station that you get to. So that you have to actually lower your face mask so that they can see that your ID matches who you actually are. They have to do that.
Right.
And yeah, it does present a danger to the TSA agent. But one thing you'll notice when you're flying is that some of the agents don't just have face masks. They actually have those plexiglass. They're like plastic shields. They're not plexiglass, right? And they are taking every precaution. They're wearing gloves and everything like that. So go ahead and sneeze on them if you want to. They're protected.
So don't be surprised if when you get there, the TSA guy looks like an alien because he's in the sense of Back to the Future when they landed and came out and the farmer
just
thought they were
like
aliens.
that, exactly. When I got off our flight, so I mentioned that we were stuck in France for almost 3 months. Well, it was 2.5 months or so. Yeah. And when we got off our plane, we flew over on a 777 that was designed for almost 300 passengers, 278, 279 passengers. And there were only about 30 people on the plane. We were the first people off the plane. And we were greeted by one of those people who looked like that guy from Back to the Future, with a mask on and everything like that. And it was just so weird. And, you're used to walking off the plane, just getting off and everything like that. And this guy was temperature screening us. We had to give him a form that said that we were telling him where we had been and everything like that. It was just really scary. I was traveling with kids. They were kind of like going, Dad, what's going on?
Yeah. So I was just reading that, and I don't think this was one of your articles. I think it was somebody else's, but I was reading that that both United and American are starting to put people on don't let fly lists of some sort, or collecting their names if they create a problem with refusal to wear masks or something to that effect. Are we anticipating that everyone's going to start doing that? Or are these going to be the outliers? And they're just, I mean, it's just like we've seen the videos of United people or some other airline dragging people out of the airplane, and that's caused such a force for it. What do we anticipate? Where can we, our best guess, say might be happening?
No. Yeah, no. I mean, you know, we're talking about the new normal for air travel here.
Yeah.
Here's the deal. There are going to be some people who refuse, some red staters who won't wear their masks. That's fine. What I've always said is that those face masks are there for boarding, takeoff, and landing. No one expects you to keep your face mask on for a 6-hour flight. No one does. Kids don't. You're served a snack or a drink. You can't keep it off. And as I noted in my story on living in France, they still love to smoke there, and so they still haven't figured out how to smoke through their face mask. But no, you know, to answer your question though, this is not like United dragging Dr. Dow off the plane. This is an industry that's fighting for its survival. They say that they can blacklist you, but as a practical matter, no passengers are going to get blacklisted for not wearing their face masks. They need every dollar that they can get. They're going to threaten, but they're not actually going to do it, I don't think.
Yeah, that's interesting. So then technology, we're hearing about contact tracing, and I don't know if anyone knows about it, but basically they're talking, Android and Apple phones now have the basics to be able to do contact tracing, so that if you use an app, you'll be able to know who was near you that might have been infected as we go on. Of course, we need to have a significant number of the population to do that. But there are also existing technologies, such as when you try to unlock your iPhone, it looks at your face. So is there some sense that the travel agency might be looking at those types of things, or have you heard of anybody looking at that so that they can make it less contact-free, like we're hearing from the delivery, the restaurant delivery types of places? Are we hearing that anybody's testing that type of technology? Apple, in fact, just changed theirs because of the mask. Now they're making it quicker to go to a manual entry because it can't always recognize you with a face mask. So, Christopher, do you know of anything that's happening in that realm?
No, I mean, TSA has been testing some facial recognition software over the last couple of years, and they just started implementing it on a wider scale with, I think Delta was one of the airlines, and JetBlue. Before the pandemic happened, I imagine that kind of technology is going to get accelerated now so that people don't have to hand over boarding passes and things like that.
Right, understand. So you mentioned flexibility a few minutes ago. Jay, if we can turn it to you for a few minutes, they're the master of flexibility. Talk to us about how do we gain flexibility? What types of things should we as people, or we as business people, do in order to gain that flexibility that Christopher was suggesting that we need to have?
Yeah, you know, one, I think it starts with getting out of your comfort zone. Which has certainly helped us over the last couple months, whether we wanted to do it or not. As we've been hearing all day, that's exactly what we've had to do. I was actually doing an in-person training last night in Southwest Minnesota, and that was one of our key topics was how do we get to be more flexible, more adaptable within our organizations at home in our communities. And it was kind of funny because it starts with getting out of your comfort zone, but trusting yourself enough to fail. You know, I think as a society, we've moved forward in this, hey, we can't make mistakes. We can't fail, rather than I'm going to move forward. I'm going to attempt this. I'm going to do something that I haven't done in the past. You know, maybe it's shifting to online training or online sales, understanding that's just another avenue to do things, but to truly trust yourself enough to fail. And at the core of it, that's where I think it all comes down to is, I have to be flexible. I have to be adaptable. I have to step out of my comfort zone. But if I don't trust myself enough, it's not happening.
That's a great point. And of course, these days, there's less trust in other people than there ever has been before. So being able to trust yourself sounds like even that much more important these days.
Well, yeah, I was reading an article from HBR a couple months ago, and it was really interesting. And it was on trust and how much do we or do we not trust our managers? And the premise of it was 60% of current employees would rather talk to a stranger on the street than their own boss. and it was alluding to that they trust a stranger on the street more than their own boss. I don't know if you could make that claim, but it's certainly something to be thought about and to be said about that. Of do we trust who we work with? And in a lot of cases, I would say the answer to that is no. I don't think we've gotten to know each other well enough, and being vulnerable and just trying new things, having different conversations.
Yeah, and you just made me think, I've got a white paper on trust. Actually, it's made by your organization, Dale Carnegie, which I'm affiliated with. So if anybody who's participating as an attendee in this wants to get a hold of that white paper, I'd be happy to share it with you. We'll be sharing our contact information after the fact, and we'll, either Jay or I will be able, I assume you have that, Jay? So one of us can get that to you. 77.
Can I add to that really quick?
Please, Toya.
Sure. So when deciding to transition and do more online, or when the crisis really hit, trust and building that credibility was very important, like between stakeholders, between the current clients, just keeping them in a loop. So a method that we used was the SEAT method, which was like just getting the speed out, like going, building that communication and just being very transparent. So SEAT stands for speed, empathy, accuracy, and transparency. And that was very, very important. And from that, using different communication skills to reiterate those things, even if we did not know what was going on. Hey, we don't know when we're going to open. We're going to be as safe as possible when we do open. Staying connected with the suppliers. All of those things were really, really important in building processes and a way to pivot.
That's great things to say. So according to the statistics I heard today, 77% of people are concerned about the loss of small business in their community. Who would like to comment about how we can help the small business in the community and what the best methodology is for us to be able to get the economy back on its feet again?
I would say working together, really knowing other business owners, if you can highlight them on your website in any type of way, making connections like this, doing the webinars, just really using that time to be together.
Okay, what else? Doc Nickols, it sounded like you wanted to add into that one.
Well, I agree with what LaToya is saying. In addition to that, the ability to stay relevant, even in these difficult times, communicating with your people, building lists. I mean, a lot of my experience is also in the nonprofit area over the last 30 plus years, and working with organizations to be able to remain relevant. And part of that is understanding the community that you live in and where you're doing business, and making sure that you're contacting those people so that they realize you're there, and when things begin to improve, that you're still there. Also, the idea of looking at a potential business. We've got a community now around the country that has a lot of different kinds of needs. Reinventing yourself means becoming relevant with the new things that are happening with people. Companies that do well are companies who find out the best ways to do real customer service.
What a great way to talk about it. Jay or Christopher, anything you want to add? Christopher, it looks like you're off mic now. So
yeah, I wanted to just say, I don't run a small business, but I do run a nonprofit that is small, so de facto small business. And we were, after the coronavirus outbreak started, we were slammed with new cases. We get cases from all over, but a lot of travel cases. So instead of getting 700 or 800 cases, we were doubling that. We were close to 2,000 new cases. And I think that with all the things that were going on with the volunteers that I work with, they really needed to feel supported. And so that's, I think, one of the fundamentals, the cornerstone of building a successful organization post-pandemic, is that you have to, if you're not going to be in an office with your people, that you need to make them feel supported. And there are many ways that you can do that online, virtually. You can communicate more often. We've had a lot more Skype calls, Zoom calls, and it really increased the number of communication with the volunteers since all this happened. So I think I wanted to just add that supporting your people is really, really important.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And Jay, what do you have to say for us here?
Yeah, I mean, to echo our other panelists, it's truly staying relevant, staying in front of people, and doing it with collaboration. I'm on the phone with business owners pretty much every night just to check in, like, where's their mental health at? Because if we're really going to get through this, we're going to need a lot of energy and enthusiasm, and cheering on the big wins and the small wins. And a small win, maybe we didn't have to let anybody go. Make sure that people know how proud you are of them for doing that. And ultimately, small communities, large communities, small businesses, unless we solve the problem together, it's going to be pretty challenging to truly thrive in this. And one of the ways we do that is, I say, let's keep our head on a swivel, right? The solution to the problem 3 months ago is probably not the solution to the problem today. There could be wonderful partnerships out there. There can be moving things to Zoom online. There can be a collaboration of different ideas. So keep a much larger open mind of, there's a lot of solutions that we can make them simple, and we can also collaborate with each other. And, as Doc said, gosh, maybe there's a way we create a whole new business through this pandemic.
Wow, keep your head on a swivel. I've never heard that before. I love the term. Really is a great term. Okay, well, I thank everybody for being with us today. The last thing that I'd like to add to that is, look, there are a lot of programs that are out there right now, both from your governments and from and I'm talking federal, state, and in some cases maybe even local governments, if you're in a large enough city. And there are also a lot of support organizations who are out there doing professional webinars like we're doing right now, putting together white papers, doing studies, creating resources for you. Yesterday we were talking about how here in the Pittsburgh area, Pittsburgh Public Schools started a public-private partnership in which they raised hundreds of thousands of dollars and were managed to take care of 1,500 families and their need to be connected while out of school, while the students are out of school. So there are a lot of those types of resources out there. You may have to do a little bit of digging. There are organizations like Jay's who will help you with the training. There are schools and consultants like Doc Nickols, and then LaToya also in her organizations. She's got a couple organizations. They're not the only ones out there. There are lots of them all over the country that you can take advantage of. So don't hesitate to seek those out. Now, from our perspective on how we're going to help you, we are now going to, we're going to post this on YouTube, on the Confirmed App YouTube channel. So if you would subscribe to that, that would be very helpful. We have 2 more webinars that are going to be coming up next week. One about selling in the new normal, and one about being more successful with Zoom. And then I anticipate we will probably be looking at adding some as well beyond that. And if you have any suggestions, feel free to let us know. After the seminar, after this webinar, actually tomorrow, we are going to be sending you out information about all of our links, all of our LinkedIn links and our URLs, and a little bit of information about some of the things that we talked about today. Jay, were you going to try to jump in here? Did I see that? Oh, it looked like it. Sorry. Okay. Anyway, just to let you know, that's what you can do. You'll be able to contact us. We thank you for joining us on the COVID Economy Leadership Forum, and I thank our panelists, Christopher Elliott, Dr. Mitchell Nichols, Jay Peltier, and LaToya Johnson-Rainey. Thank you all for helping us. Thanks everybody for being part of this. And if there's something we can do, you will know how to get in touch with us. We're going to make sure after the fact. Have a great rest of the day.